What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. You know what time it is? It's time for another mailbag episode. So let's jump into it. This week, we have a super interesting question from one of our newer fans. And this question actually comes from a viewer. He says, as an avid follower of all things firearms related, I am always curious about who founded the major gun brands. Could you do a series on the origin stories of the big 4 or 5 manufacturers? I think that's a great idea. But in this video, we're going to just start with the first one. We'll start with Smith & Wesson, and we'll work our way through the other ones. So let's get started. Smith & Wesson was founded by 2 men. Obviously, Smith & Wesson. The first being Lieutenant Colonel Daniel B. Wesson, and the second being Horace Smith. Now, Horace Smith was born on October 18, 1797 in Springfield, Massachusetts, and Daniel B. Wesson was born on August 26, 1810 in New York City. They both had very different backgrounds. I mean, they were 17 years apart, so they grew up in completely different times. Really? In 1829, Smith joined the staff of a gun shop in Worcester, Massachusetts. This is significant because at the time, percussion weapons were just starting to come into style. And this gun shop owner was already producing parts for those new percussion weapons. By 1830, though, Smith was offered a job by a gun manufacturer in Boston named John C. And he would be the one to discover the process of putting finished gun barrels into the wooden stocks, while the stock was still green, which was a huge improvement over the methods of the time. This discovery made him a partner in the company. Unfortunately, in 1837, the company burned down and went bankrupt. So then Smith would go on to join forces with London-based gun importer William Arnew. They would set up shop in Norwich, Connecticut. And during their partnership, Smith would invent his most famous creation, the volcanic pistol. Volcanic pistol featured a revolving cylinder with 5 chambers, and it was the first commercially successful revolver to hit the market. Smith's invention not only made the company quite a bit of money, but it also caught the eye of the U.S. Army. In fact, the Army ordered 1,000 of these pistols, but unfortunately, there were some serious flaws with the design. The biggest one being that it used a self-contained cartridge, which leaked gases and exploded occasionally. While Smith did improve upon the design later, the damage was already done, and Smith and his business partner knew would end up splitting ways in 1847. Entered Daniel B. Wesson. He began his career working for his father, who owned a small machine shop in New York. But when he turned 21, he left home and moved out to Ohio, where he worked as an apprentice gunsmith. In 1833, he moved back to New York and set up his own gun shop on Canal Street. But by 1846, he had built up enough capital to open up a larger shop in Hartford, Connecticut. It was here where he met a salesman named John C. Roeder, who brought Wesson his first order for Smith's volcanic pistols. After seeing the pistol and how well it was made, Wesson decided to partner up with Smith, and together they would form the Smith & Wesson Firearms Company in 1850. They struggled financially in the beginning, and they ended up selling the company to investors who became the new board of directors. But Smith & Wesson remained as employees, and they continued making guns. Until Smith passed away in 1864. Wesson continued on for another 12 years after that. But in 1876, he too would pass away, and that would mark the end of the Smith & Wesson era. Now, Smith & Wesson didn't just stop at revolvers, they also manufactured rifles and pistols. They also had a brief stint in manufacturing barbed wire, which ironically would lead to the development of the modern-day cattle gun. That's right, during the Great Cattle Rebellion of 1883, the cowboys were actually using Smith & Wesson Model 10 and 12 revolvers chambered in .45 Colt to defend themselves against the barbed wire fences that the ranchers were putting up. And as you can imagine, those old-school wood-frame revolvers weren't holding up well against the barbed wire. So a local gunsmith in Wichita, Kansas, took matters into his own hands and designed a steel-framed revolver that would hold up better to the rigors of ranching life. That gun would be the precursor to the modern-day cattle gun. But back in the late 1800s, Smith & Wesson's factory was located in Norwich, Connecticut. But by 1870, it had expanded so much that they needed a larger facility. So they moved the entire operation to a brand new building in Springfield. This location would become significant because it is still the location of the company as headquarters to this very day. And that is the story of how Smith & Wesson got started. But that is not the end of the story, because next week, we're going to talk about the origins of Colt. So make sure to stay tuned so you don't miss that one. This next question comes from a viewer. He says, I want to thank you for your service. I'm currently in the military and will be deploying soon. Can I take my Glock 43X Mos with me? Yes, you absolutely can. In fact, a lot of soldiers take their personal sidearms on deployment. Just make sure you follow all the guidelines and regulations set forth by your chain of command. And of course, the DoD. This next one's from a viewer. He says, what round do you suggest for home defense? 9mm or 38 Special? Now, if you were talking about just penetration and stopping power, then 9mm is definitely the better choice. but 38 Special has been around a long time, and it has proven itself in millions of defensive situations. With the advent of modern hollow-point ammunition, both of these rounds are more than capable of defending your home. My personal choice for home defense would be the 9mm just because there is less felt recoil and more ammo capacity. But 38 Special will definitely do the trick if that's all you've got. This next one comes from another viewer. She says, when it comes to concealed carry, does anyone else wish that there was a better solution for +P ammo? Like maybe something that would alert you if you loaded it like a regular round. Now, that is a fantastic idea. It would be really nice if there was a visual or audible indicator that told you whether you loaded normal ammo or +P ammo. Maybe there is, and I'm just not aware of it. But even better would be if someone could invent a +P round that functioned just as the standard round. Then there would be no need for a warning indicator, because it would unmatter if you put a +P round in there. It would just function normally. This next one comes from another viewer. He says, are there any tips on how to remove gunk from a blind mag release button? Mine is stuck. Absolutely. There are several videos online showing exactly how to do that. If you look hard enough, you should be able to find one that fits whatever make and model of firearm that you have. That is all the mail we have time for today, folks. So I want to thank everybody who sent in questions, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.